In my early 20s, my date and I decided to visit a bar in West Sacramento for a night of pool. We had been there before and we always enjoyed chatting with the bartender, who was a strikingly beautiful and engaging woman. Unfortunately, we didn't see her that night. That night, as we walked in, we noticed the pool table was already occupied by a man and a woman already playing a game. While my date went to the bar to get drinks, I stood by and watched. After a few minutes, the man caught my eye and struck up a conversation. When my date returned, the man invited us to join them for a game. I barely noticed at the time that his female companion had not spoken a single word. We accepted his offer, and he racked up the balls. As we played, we introduced ourselves. Almost immediately, the man began asking me personal questions that made me uneasy. He asked where I lived, how long my date and I had been together, whether we lived together. His questions were casual, almost friendly, but there was something calculated about the way he and his companion exchanged glances. Despite the surface-level pleasantries, an unshakable sense of discomfort settled over me. Strangely, the woman still hadn't spoken. When the game ended, the man extended another invitation. He and his friend had discovered a great bar nearby and wanted us to come along. At first, I hesitated, unsure how to respond. He asked again, insisting it wasn't far. My date and I exchanged glances, and before he could speak, I blurted out, "No thanks, we have dinner plans." It wasn't true, we had no such plans, but my gut screamed at me to get away. My date didn't argue. I think he saw the fear in my eyes. Without further hesitation, we grabbed our jackets and left. The moment we stepped outside, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Back at my truck, my date asked what had shaken me so badly. I told him I had a terrible feeling about those two. Something wasn't right. I pointed out how strange it was that the man invited us along without even consulting his companion. My date shrugged it off, likely chalking it up to paranoia, but he didn't press the issue. A few days later, I opened the newspaper and felt my blood turn to ice. An article detailed the gruesome murder of a woman from West Sacramento. At first, I skimmed past it until I reached the continuation on another page. There, staring back at me, was a photo of the victim. The bartender from the place we went to. She had been kidnapped and murdered the very night we had been there. A chill ran through me. What a horrible, tragic coincidence. I was deeply unsettled, but it wasn't until about a month later that the full weight of what had happened truly hit me. A man and woman had just been arrested for the bartender's murder as well as the murders of several others, including 4 couples. When I turned to the front page of the Sacramento Bee, my stomach lurched. There, staring back at me, were the mugshots of the killers, Gerald and Charlene Galago. The very couple who had invited us to another bar. As I read on, my horror deepened. This was one of their tactics, alluring victims into their van by pretending to be a friendly couple. When my date and I declined their invitation, they simply moved on to their next target. Because of me, they had chosen someone else. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over me: relief, guilt, disbelief. Intellectually, I knew it wasn't my fault that the bartender had died. But I couldn't shake the haunting thought, had we accepted their invitation, we would have been the ones who never made it home. I've carried that realization with me ever since. And from that moment on, I stayed away from bars for a very, very long time.
The second story is coming up next.
I worked as a bartender for nearly 10 years, and in that time, I saw plenty of strange things, like bar fights, drug deals, even people getting a little too close to the supernatural after one too many drinks. But nothing ever disturbed me as much as the night I met him. It was a slow Tuesday night, the kind where time drags and every second behind the bar feels like an eternity. The usuals were there. Mike, who always ordered a double whiskey neat and mumbled about his ex-wife, and Lisa, the chain-smoking pool shark who could outdrink anyone. I was rinsing glasses when I noticed someone I hadn't seen before, sitting at the far end of the bar. He was tall and thin, with deep-set eyes that didn't blink nearly enough. His suit was dated, like something from the 1950s, and despite the summer heat, he wore a heavy trench coat draped over his shoulders. But the strangest thing? I hadn't seen him come in. One moment, the bar had been its usual half-empty self, and the next, there he was, sitting with perfect stillness, hands resting lightly on the polished wood. I approached, forcing a smile. "What can I get you?" He looked up at me, and for the briefest moment, I felt something cold run through me, like I had just walked into a freezer. His eyes were the kind that saw through you, like he already knew everything about you. He smiled. "Whiskey. Neat." His voice was calm, but there was something off about it. Something hollow. I nodded, grabbed a glass, and poured him a shot. He didn't touch it. Instead, he just sat there, watching me. "Slow night?" he asked after a long silence. "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound unnerved. "Not much going on." He nodded slowly, like he already knew the answer. "It's always slow on nights like these." I wasn't sure what he meant, but something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. I glanced at the mirror behind the bar, just to keep my eyes on him while I wiped down the counter. But when I looked, I saw only an empty bar stool. I turned back to him immediately, my breath catching. He was still there, sitting in front of me, staring. I forced a laugh. "Didn't see you in the mirror." He smiled wider. "Most people don't." I felt the air grow heavier, like the room itself was pressing down on me. My hands felt clammy. I had been bartending for years. I'd seen people get weird, get aggressive, even get dangerous. But this was different. This was wrong. "You work here alone?" he asked. Something in his voice sent a chill down my spine. My shift partner, Tony, had gone out back for a smoke, leaving me alone up front. I swallowed hard and shook my head. "Nope. We've got a full staff in the back." He chuckled, like he knew I was lying. Then he finally lifted his glass, but instead of drinking, he just held it near his lips, inhaling the scent. "You should be careful tonight." A loud bang from the alley behind the bar made me jump. It sounded like someone knocking against the metal dumpster. I turned toward the sound for just a second, When I looked back, the man was gone. His untouched glass of whiskey sat on the bar. Tony came in a moment later, frowning. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I wanted to laugh, to shake it off, but my hands were still shaking. "Did you see that guy?" I asked. Tony glanced at the empty stool. "What guy?" I didn't sleep well that night. And the next evening, when I walked into the bar, I noticed something strange. The stool at the end of the bar, the one he had sat in, was missing. I asked my boss about it, and he gave me a confused look. "We haven't had a stool there in years," he said. "Not since the accident." A cold sensation crept up my spine. "What accident?" He hesitated, then sighed. "About 10 years ago, a guy died sitting at the end of the bar. Heart attack." By the time anyone noticed, he was already gone. I felt my stomach drop. I never saw him again. But sometimes, on slow Tuesday nights, I still pour an extra shot of whiskey and leave it at the end of the bar. Just in case.
The third story is next.
I had been talking to him online for a few weeks before we agreed to meet in person. His name was Adam, or at least, that's what he told me. He seemed nice enough in our messages. He seemed charming, funny, and surprisingly polite compared to most guys on dating apps. When he suggested we meet for a drink at a quiet little bar downtown, I didn't think twice about it. The bar was dimly lit, the kind of place where the music wasn't too loud and the drinks weren't too expensive. I got there early, just to get a feel for the place. He arrived exactly on time. The first thing I noticed was that he was taller than I expected. Not just tall, but too tall, his long frame almost unfolding as he stepped through the door. He moved smoothly, deliberately, like every motion was carefully planned. His clothes were crisp, too crisp, like they had never been worn before. But the thing that struck me the most was his face. It was a broken bar, ordinary, forgettable. The kind of face you'd see in a crowd and never recall afterward. He smiled as he approached the booth where I sat. "You must be Claire." Something in his voice was off, not deep or high, just a broken bar hollow. I shook off the weird feeling and smiled back. "Yep, that's me." We exchanged the usual pleasantries. He asked about my job, my interests, my family. But as the conversation went on, something felt wrong. His questions were too precise, like he wasn't just making small talk, he was collecting details. "So, you live alone?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. I hesitated. "I have a roommate." I didn't. He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's nice. Someone to keep you company." He barely touched his drink. In fact, I never actually saw him take a sip. He just held the glass, occasionally bringing it near his lips but never drinking. Then he started talking about the bar. "This place has a lot of history," he said, running a finger along the rim of his glass. "Did you know a woman went missing from here a few years ago?" I stiffened. "No, a broken bar, I hadn't heard that." He nodded slowly, almost amused. "Yeah. She was here, sitting at a booth just like this one. Met a guy for a date. Just like you. A cold chill crept down my spine. That's a broken bar creepy. He smiled again, staring at me in a way that made my skin crawl. People say she walked out with him, but the cameras never caught it. Just vanished. No struggle, no screams. Just a broken bar gone. I forced a laugh. Okay, now you're trying to freak me out. He tilted his head, considering me. Is it working? My fingers tightened around my glass. No, I lied. He leaned in slightly. You know what's interesting? The police never found any leads. It's like she never existed. No digital footprint, no history, nothing. I glanced at my phone on the table, suddenly hyper-aware of how vulnerable I was. I had texted my friend before I arrived, telling her where I'd be and who I was meeting. But as I looked at Adam, if that was even his real name, I had the strange, terrible feeling that if something did happen to me tonight, no one would ever find me either. I forced a smile and picked up my purse. Well, this has been fun, but I have an early morning. I should get going. He didn't try to stop me. He just watched as I slid out of the booth and stood up. Be careful, he said. I turned back. Excuse me? His smile widened, just slightly. It's late. You never know who you might run into. I didn't look back as I walked out of the bar, my heart hammering in my chest. I checked over my shoulder the entire way home, half expecting to see him following me. He wasn't. But the next morning, when I checked the dating app, his profile was gone. Not just deleted or erased. Like it had never existed. The messages we exchanged were missing. His photos, his name, and everything was gone. I tried searching for him online, using the details he had given me. Nothing. No social media, no records, no sign that he had ever been a real person. And when I finally looked up the story about the missing woman from the bar, I found it. She had gone missing exactly 3 years ago to the day. I never went on another blind date again.